Hello, everyone. It's wild technology, isn't it?
Always.
Gives me
Lucky
like
you're
working on
control.
this all afternoon. But thank you for joining us on the My Millennial Money webinar about property.
Yes, all things property.
All things property. And I'm just going to set the scene of how it's going to go tonight, everybody. We're going to we're going to go through, we've got heaps of property questions. So everyone who sent in your questions, we kind of went through and we look for themes for things to answer. So if we don't read your question, it's probably because, David asked a similar one and that's what we dug up. So
Yeah, and overwhelmed. It was
hundreds and hundreds of questions.
totally.
And we could not do this webinar without Bricklet. And I guess what we're going to do, John, later in the podcast, we're going to have a chat with somebody who has purchased a Bricklet.
Yes.
And it's a new kid on the block,
Yes.
on the Bricklet.
Looking forward to that.
So we just wait one more minute for people to file in because this is all new to us, this tech.
Well, if it's new to me, it's definitely new to me.
Yeah. So, yeah. You ready?
I think I'm ready.
Let's start with a question, and then what we're going to do, we'll introduce people to our event partner. So, Laura asks, should you buy a property just to get into the market, or is it worth saving and buying something you see yourself living in?
Yeah, good one off the top, isn't it? So, my thoughts on that, Laura, would be if you know that you're going to be there to live in for the next 10 years plus, then you'd seriously consider doing that now, especially as a first home buyer, because obviously there's first home buyer concessions, which are pretty attractive at the moment and might be getting even more attractive. We'll talk about that a bit more. But if you don't know where you see yourself living, then I think that the next best time to buy is now and getting into the market with a strategy that you think you're comfortable with and it's going to work.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I don't know, like I wouldn't do stuff just to get into the market, because what you're doing is you could be buying the biggest dog of a property in the worst suburb on the planet just to get into the market.
Totally.
So I think the planets need to align. And sorry, I'm just checking my phone here just in case there's any issues, but I think we're good. But yeah, I think, Laura, if you see yourself living in it and the planets align, absolutely, I would do it. But again, we're not getting in the market because our parents told us so. We're not getting in the market because everyone else is. And I will say there's probably about 70% of people watching this tonight, John, who are first home buyers.
Yeah.
And that might not be first home to live in. It could be first property buyers. So
for those who've got a mega portfolio of 10 properties, just bear with us, all right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I think just to get into the market, or is it worth saving and buying something you see yourself living in?
Yeah, well, I read it as though, Laura's got a strategy. She's ready to buy as an investment, but if she thinks she's going to be in a certain pocket for 10 years, I'd be jumping into my own home.
Yeah, definitely. If you've just joined us, we're just getting started with it. We've got a heap of questions, and we want to just thank Bricklet for sponsoring and getting behind this podcast. We're going to play a short video. It's under 1 minute. It's short and snappy, just to show you what Bricklet is all about. So let's play the video.
If you're like many Australians, buying a property feels out of reach. Bricklet is here to change that, with a chance to get started from as little as $25,000. Bricklet takes properties and fragments them into smaller, more affordable pieces, or bricklets. When you buy a Bricklet, you become a part owner registered on the property title, offering you a real start in property and access to real estate income without the big deposit or mortgage. Start building your property future with Bricklet.
There you go, Bricklet. So in about an hour, we will talk with Sam, who's purchased a Bricklet. And that was a game changer because on the My Millennial Money podcast, we did an episode with Darren Younger, the CEO of Bricklet.
Yep.
And John, he wasn't there, but he listened to the episode 3 times because it was such a game changer.
Yeah, just sitting there thinking, well, who's sponsoring tonight? Like, years gone by to be some big dog that's been around for a long while, but all of a sudden Bricklet appears, and it's a new version, isn't it?
So if you're actually wondering, the practicalities of it is they buy a property and they cut it up into, so like 10 people can buy the property, but it's not just a managed fund. You're actually on the title.
Yeah,
so game changer. And if you don't know who we are, I'm Glen James. This is John Pidgeon. We run My Millennial Money, the podcast, and we also have a podcast called My Millennial Property. So, and we drop episodes, 3 or 4 episodes a week on both of those. So let's get into it. And I probably didn't answer Laura's question 100%, but once we warm up, we're gonna. It's a bit overwhelming here, trying to get this looking good for you guys and sounding good. So we're going to go through to 9 p.m. tonight. And at about 20 past 8, we're going to stop. John's going to talk about some stuff that he's got happening. We've got a couple of bonuses for tonight. And let's get in it. Kim asks, what do you think of the property market in 3 to 5 years' time? Just started saving for a new full-time job, full-time job. She doesn't have the money at the moment, but really wanting to buy.
Kim, great question. So I see 2 parts to this question. The first one is there's more than just one property market around the country. There's thousands. So generally the media talks about probably Melbourne and Sydney as your markets when they're headlining, doom or gloom. Boom or gloom, should I say. But so specifically thinking, well, what is that particular market doing in 3 to 5 years' time is anyone's guess. I suppose we need to look at the trends and see what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 years to get a gauge of where it may be. An example of that is the Perth market, Glenn. So when we look at the Perth market 3 to 4 years ago, it was in a bit of hurt. Vacancy rates were really high, etc. Fast forward to now, vacancy rates have been coming down ever since that time, and there's a little bit of momentum in the market. So the vacancy rates are now normalised, and there is potentially some opportunities in that market. So where it'll be in 3 years, 4 years' time is anyone's guess. So you've just got to keep monitoring it. I wouldn't stress too much about what you think it'll be like in 3, 4, 5 years' time, Kim. It'll be the right time to buy when you've got the money, the bank's prepared to lend you, and you've got a solid strategy up your sleeve.
I want to, along the way, John, just if I hear anything that's half jargon, and also I forgot to say we will put the chat on from about 8:30 till 9 o'clock, so it's going to be a free-for-all. So I'm just going to be the kind of person, like if you say jargony things, so vacancy rates. So when people are doing their research or you're looking at the TV and you see the news say vacancy rates. So what is that exactly and what does it mean? Yeah,
so it really means that I've got an investment property and there may be a period of time throughout a 12-month period where it may be vacant. Right now, the analysts use a percentage to gauge that. Right now, categorically speaking, we say, well, 1% usually equals around 1 week of vacancy. So if there's a market or a suburb that's got 7% vacancy rates, then we might assume roughly a 7-week vacancy on average that immediate area would be vacant, or that property within it would be vacant for that time.
So is it as easy as saying if there's a 50% vacancy rate, half of the year it hasn't got a tenant?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we'd never really see that. Like the real oversupplied markets would probably reach, I know there's some suburbs in Sydney in the apartment unit market that are around 13% at the moment. And that is as high as you would see it in majority cases.
Okay, so vacancy rate, 13% bad.
Yeah.
100% don't go near it.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah.
1% good. So it could be an area that John's looking at. It could have good rental. So the reason, I guess I just want to camp on this for people so we can learn about this and talk through it. So if you see on the news that, this suburb out here has a vacancy rate of 2%, we know that the chances of it being empty throughout the year is very low because it's 2% per suburb.
Correct, yeah. And within that suburb, you've got to dig a bit deeper again with units or houses or apartments and even to the point of how appealing is that particular house. So, but at least you can, as a starting point, you can start to forecast. You know that if the suburb's 2%, which is pretty good to be honest. Like we look at roughly 2% and under is ideal.
Okay.
So, yeah, if it's getting up around 4 or 5%, we don't.
And it really,
be
the
worried.
vacancy rate doesn't mean anything if you want to live in it, because
No.
who cares? Like if it's a bad place to rent
Yeah.
or to have an investment property, you might want to live there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just on Kim's point, it's funny, like I was thinking this, like she could buy a bricklet. Basically, because if she only had 25 grand saved,
Yes.
and that's a lot of money for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
for example, she might think in her mind, I need 60 grand to get into the property market.
Yeah.
You know, we'll learn later through talking with Sam how much it cost him to get into the property market
Yeah.
at a low entry point.
Yeah, and that it's a common question is I can go and buy a property now for 300K, but what will that get me versus saving a little bit more and getting in at 450?
And I want to pull you up on one other thing. One of the common myths out there is that people say, and the news say, the property market. Just talk to us about how many property markets you actually think there are in Australia.
Yeah. So minimum 12,000,
Really?
right? Which don't be alarmed or scared about that. It's just particular regions around the country that you've, majority of those in the thousands are rubbish, I suppose. And I'll speak about it a fair bit on the podcast, but we look at the top 30 cities by population, right? Within those 30 cities, there might be a few hundred different markets that trend from time to time. So it does take a while to analyse that
So
stuff.
if the Daily Mail does an ad or a publication or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
product plate or
Some
whatever,
blurb.
and says the property market in Australia is screwed, it doesn't mean anything, because realistically, and you need to get like a bottle that isn't noisy. So there could be, within Sydney or Melbourne, there could be like a million sub-markets.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's where you've really got to drill right down to your suburb.
Question here from Zoe, and I think there's about 65% female or women watching.
Was there?
Yeah. Please explain the reasons why we should not pay off an investment property fully when we have no other home loans.
Yeah, look, there aren't too many reasons as to why you wouldn't. Like the idea at the end of the day, when I say end of the day, when you're free and retired, yeah, you want to have no debts or very minimal debts and have a high cash flow. So, well, my thinking is anyway. So if your thinking, Zoe, is just to buy that one property and just drill down and pay it off and own it outright, then go for it. I suppose the other alternative is to pay some of it off, but free some cash up for some other investments to just diversify your portfolio and leverage your money a bit more.
Yeah, I guess when I was a financial advisor, you know, if you got a client in who was 45 or 50 or whatever, and you do like financial modeling, the goal was to pay down as much debt as possible. So if they said, we want to stop working at age 60 or 65, that there'd be no debt. So at least then, because the way I see it in my own life, like all my mortgage and investment property debt, it's on principal and interest. And that means I'm not only paying the interest off, but I'm paying down the loan as well. Yeah. And what I'm doing in my mind is buying an income stream for the Glen in 30 years' time.
Totally, yeah. And I think in my investment history anyway, there's been no better time to pay principal and interest on your loans, because the interest rates being so low, you'll often find, even if you are paying principal and interest, that your after-tax cash flow will be positive.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, if the worst thing happened that you pay down your loan, you probably always go and get another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is a question furthermore to that, Zoe, around, well, do I leave the loan outstanding and not actually take the title back off the banks? I mean, in my mind, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
This is a juicy one. Elena asks, when buying your first property, is it more beneficial for it to be a home or an investment property if you don't have the need for a home to live in the future?
So, Yeah, it's got a bit of Laura's question about it, this one, because my feeling is, I suppose my strategy through my 20s and 30s was always to rent vest, right? And that's not for everyone, and I don't use that strategy every time with clients. But what I will say is if we're not sure where we want to live in the next 5 or 6 years and we're not fussed about that and we're happy to rent, then maybe investment properties are a solid option for you, especially in maybe your Sydney and Melbourne areas where I'm happy to rent in a nice blue chip suburb, but I can't actually afford to buy there now, or what I can buy in that suburb's not going to be suffice. So I've got the flexibility to look at other locations around the country, so that are in a maybe better location for growth, or maybe have a better yield associated to them, or a lower entry cost, etc.
Yeah, because I think it's so important. Like when we grow up in, suburbia or, a working class home, we always think the property market is the suburb that we live in. And it could be, geez, I can't actually afford a house around here.
Yeah.
But I've got a decent income. I don't really want to live here because I grew up here and I can't afford a house here. And I'm going to go to uni or work in a capital city or something. And I know I want to move around with my career. You might be a doctor, you might be in the army or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it is, by default, you have to be putting your money to work.
Totally. Absolutely.
And that would probably mean to get G'd up about investing somewhere else in a different property market than you're living in or even working in.
Yeah, and the Great Aussie Dream, I think, has changed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years in a lot of locations around the country simply because of affordability. So if the median house price in Melbourne or Sydney is 800,000, 900,000, we need 120 grand minimum to get ourselves in. Now, it takes a long time to save that sort of money. So how can I maybe fast track? Can I go into 2 other locations with my 50K each to fast track or leverage my money to catch up to that ideal dream home blue chip location that I want to return to?
So I guess it all goes back to strategy. As we always say, every person's strategy is so different because there could be one variable that changes it. So I want to just encourage you at this time, what is your strategy for building wealth? Just have a think right now. What is your strategy for building wealth? If you don't know, that's totally fine. But if it includes property, awesome, you're in the right place. If it includes property but I don't want to be highly leveraged, I don't want to be a minimalist and cash flow stuff, bloody Bricklet keep coming to mind, and I'm not trying to place them in, but you know what I mean? It could be I'm buying little Bricklets around Australia, or it could be my strategy is to build wealth with super. So whatever that strategy is, you need to be clear on your strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being open-minded is a big part in that because, again, most people are taught growing up, let's buy our home to live in, contribute to super, and hopefully it'll all work out okay. So that concept, I think, is dramatically changing and will continue to change more and more over the next 10 or 15 years.
Moving on to somebody who's probably in a good position with their property portfolio, and that's Jess. She said, thoughts on holding acreage? And this was up your alley, John. By the way, do you like how I threw in Bricklet to that answer?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, well done. Thanks to our sponsor.
Don't hate me, everyone. Thoughts on holding acreage? I have a property that was largely a lifestyle purchase at the time, but now I want different things. Not sure if I should sell and reinvest into other property likely to see better capital growth or hold on to it. It has tax advantages, but it's a bit of a hassle to hold on to. Thanks.
Thank you, Jess.
Well, let's make an assumption up here, okay? We'll say acreage, particularly around where we live. Acreages, they're not on the cheaper side. So let's say that there's $1 million acreage, okay? What amount of debt would we assume that she's got on there?
Let's say 80%.
80, well, 500, cut in half.
All right, 500.
So Jess has got a 500K property, basically the equity in the property. So the equity in her property, if the property is worth $1 million and you owe $500,000 on it, if you sold everything, you would only walk away with $500,000 cash.
Yes.
So the question is, what should she do? So there's 500 grand of equity. It doesn't suit her lifestyle anymore. It has tax advantages. So I would say from the outset, we're not doing anything. We're not leading with a tax advantage.
No,
I think a
it's a
tax
byproduct.
advantage with investment is by the way, you got this tax advantage.
Yeah.
By the way, X, Y, Z, or whatever that is. So you're not leading with your strategy with we're doing this strategy because it's a tax advantageous thing.
Yeah.
It's a byproduct. So what are your thoughts on this question, John?
Well, when I look at acreage, and I've come off acreage, so I'm pretty passionate about acreage, Jess. The first thing I would check is, can I cut that acreage up? Can I subdivide it into a couple or 4 or 6 or 8? If the answer that's no, then cool, that's fine. A bit of a hassle to hold. So what is that? To me, that's an emotional thing. To say, well, it's a hassle to hold because of the upkeep or
the adjustment.
Yeah, something's like it's just taking up some of my time. Well, if the capital growth was there and it was a good investment long term, are we prepared to put up with that bit of a hassle, or can we outsource some of that hassle and make that work for the long term? So generally speaking, if acreage is in a good prime location and not out in the middle of nowhere, it'll have pretty good performance going forward. And it looks as though, Jess is getting some tax advantages, which is great, but what's the cash flow on that property? And looking, the grass is not necessarily greener is probably what I'm saying there to Jess. I would be more than keen to hold it. Is the ability to pull some equity out of it to go and diversify the portfolio?
Yeah, I think, and that's funny, like John and I will always have different opinions.
We basically disagree.
Yeah, I don't know, like if I hold an acreage and I was actually over it and I could cash out, buy somewhere else outright, and we're out of debt. And we know that debt has a hold hanging over us sometimes because everyone who took money out of super, well, I'm being dramatic here, everyone who took money out of super to fund their life because they're in financial hardship, most of them paid off debt because they didn't want that hanging over their head.
Yeah.
So if there is debt on the property and you can walk away, go, hey, I now own a house that suits my lifestyle now without any debt, I can then go, okay, what do I want to do with my wealth creation strategy?
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't want her to close her eyes because hassle can opportunity sometimes sitting there.
What I'm going to do, because that's a segue, throughout tonight, we are... So on the My Millennial Money podcast, and there's plenty of you watching, John does clarity calls. So if you want to jump on the phone with John and bounce your situation off him, usually I get John to charge and I set the price. I get John to charge and I don't get a cent of it. He gets it. Usually, John, you would charge $330, but if you want, you can see that pop up now. We'll just leave it up for 5 minutes and we might put it up at the end. If you want a clarity call, he's taking like $70 off. Is that right?
Looks like 80 to me.
Oh, what did I do? Whatever. 250. Yeah.
All right. You set the price around here.
So if you do want to jump on the phone, Jess, with John, I think that could really help you out. And if you are after an example of a clarity call on the podcast, we recorded, there's a heap in there. So just put it up in the Facebook group or search in the Facebook group clarity call and you can have an example of some live clarity calls. Because that's the type of thing, like when John gets on the phone with someone like Jess, he can be like, okay, so what are you doing? And like just workshop it a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely look into where that acreage actually is sitting.
Totally. This is another interesting one. Fallon asks, buying a property in ACT, is it worth buying a house for 650 plus or buy a townhouse for 450 and use the equity to get a home, presumably somewhere else? Yeah,
so is Fallon saying here, if I buy the townhouse for 450, I'm going to get some growth out of it soon?
No, I read it as I've got borrowings of up to 700K.
Yeah.
So is it worth borrowing 700, living in a house in the ACT,
Yeah.
or using that 700K that I can get by basically leverage up across 2 separate properties?
Yeah, okay.
So maybe a house in a regional centre that might have some growth,
Mm.
and then I'll put up with a townhouse in the ACT.
Yeah. Look, I always come back to highest and best use of my money. So if I can lend 700 or 650 and I'm comfortable with repayments and I know the rental yields on that and I've got the deposits for that, I'd probably, with those sort of numbers, I'd be looking house in ACT as opposed to a townhouse in the ACT for 450. And knowing, generally speaking, the Canberra market at the moment, townhouses, certain suburbs, bit of oversupply. So that's more of a market-specific answer. But generally speaking, highest and best use of money. If the yield works, if the deposit's there, I'd be thinking house.
To live in. Yeah. I think, for me, if it is your first property, Fallon, I think we get to this point where it's like, you got to enjoy your money and your house. Like, can you buy a 700K house? I mean, most people, I know it's a broad brush statement, there's a lot of public servants, a lot of people in Canberra who have good incomes, and everything's kind of inflated because everyone's on a bloody government salary.
Yes.
But yeah, I would challenge you to probably, I don't know, get some information. But I'm a big fan of, me personally, I like to live in the house I own and I want it to be nice. But maybe, well, here's the other strategy. Do you continue to rent in Canberra and then go borrow 700 and buy a big block of land somewhere in a regional centre and then put a duplex on it?
Yeah, if he's open to renting.
And then flip that bad boy in.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
Yeah, if it's a mindset thing for Fallon. If he's open to renting, then there's definitely some massive positives around it. But I'm getting the feeling that he wouldn't mind living in his own home, and I don't want to stress him out by taking that away from him.
Yeah, totally.
Especially when, for first home buyers at the moment, as I said earlier, there's no better time to be a first home buyer. You can get in for half the price than you could have.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that with what you're doing later, because we've got a little presentation that we'll show you. But let's go to Nikisha. And if you're watching Nikisha, hello. Thanks for joining us. She's 21, graduating uni at the end of this year. Good with savings, but haven't landed a full-time job yet. Still wants to travel the world. I know I will when the time is right to buy a house. Should I buy a house to live in first or buy a house to rent out, i.e., get the job, investment property, travel the world, come back, then sort out life?
Yeah, I think we're going to differ on this. Actually, I can guarantee it. Nikisha, my personal thoughts on this is get yourself an investment property, get into the best market possible for the money you've got, provided that you can lend. Given the fact that you haven't got a full-time job, we just need to see what you can borrow. And then once it's taken care of itself, which with a good strategy it should be, we can then head off overseas for 5 years and come back and enjoy the spoils.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all totally fine with that. But I would say, as long as you're buying, like, your mindset's got to be there, number one. That, and I think her mindset is starting to get there because she's asking the question. So 21-year-old, yeah, sure. Imagine if you were 40 years old, look back when you were 21, I bought my first house. The only thing I would say is I'm not running out to buy a house as an investment property for the sake of it.
No.
Just scraping in to get it. Then I piss off to London and I'm running on the line and it's costing me $6,000 a year to hold the property and I don't have any solid work over there. Yeah. So
that comes back to strategy though.
Exactly. But that's like, I need a strategy, number one, that my income will not reduce when I'm in overseas or whatever. Yeah. Or two, I've got a good buffer, because the last thing you want to do is get a letter from the freaking bank while you're trying to live this life in London. And if that all sounds too hard, piss off, go and enjoy life, and then come back and just hit it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a can-do attitude for Nikisha, so
Yeah.
I would argue that we could find something that would actually cover costs for her while she's overseas, regardless of whether she's working over there or not.
Yeah, right. I mean, I as I said, I would do it, but I'll just make sure that you're not left unstuck.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of that. 1999, for those of you who were born, I bought my first property and then went overseas in 2001 and came back 2 years later, and it, in the 4 years, it had doubled in value.
Yeah, wow.
Right, so if I had have waited, it obviously different result.
But if you had waited, you would have bought in a different market and you might have got the same result.
Could have, but that was guaranteed when I got back.
Totally. Jade asks, thoughts on negative gearing. My partner and I pay stacks of tax and thinking of looking into it. We can afford the repayments if anything goes wrong. So what I'll do, John, is get you to start by explaining, while I have a drink of water, and I better not make one bit of noise when I drink this water. Explain what negative gearing is.
Yes. So basically what happens is it's the rent amount coming in. Let's call it $500 a week, 25 grand a year comes in. The running costs exceed that 25 grand a year of income, right? So the example might be it's costing me 30 grand a year to run. 25 grand a year is coming in. There's basically a 5 grand negative shortfall, which I need to cover. Okay, so once is all said and done and you do your tax returns and you get your tax benefits against that negative loss, we will get some sort of tax return, which in today's markets, most of them around the country, we should have a positive outcome, right? I don't know about you personally, well I do, but I'm not in the business of losing money, right? So I don't want something to have 25k of income coming in and then after tax it's still costing me 5 grand to hold. I want a positive outcome after tax.
Yeah.
So you've got that before tax number and then you've got the after tax number. So the after tax is the important one.
Yeah, and I think Jade, again, it sounds dumb, but it's like, I think we need to say, what's your after tax cash flow like?
Yeah.
Can we service a property? Because I'd rather you pay an extra 8 grand a year in tax, but maybe get 50 grand of growth over 2 years. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll show you something, as you mentioned, towards the end about that example. But yeah, I think tax benefits are secondary to your real strategy. So is the real strategy capital growth or is it cash flow? They're the two common ones. Tax is a byproduct of investing, but it's got to be seriously looked at, especially if we've got two people on high top bracket incomes. We need to make some inroads there.
Okay, so let's just talk buying us, and this is from Sarah, buying, and then we're going to ask a question about post-pandemic. Buying a second property using the equity in your first home, the ins and the outs, and how this works.
Yes.
So let's do another example.
Yep.
We've got a home and it's worth $500,000.
Yeah.
And we owe
300
on it. So there's $200,000 of equity. So
Yes.
again, we'll repeat. If we sold the home tomorrow and walked away because we're going to live in a commune and cook off the farm and all that,
Yeah.
we would end up with $200,000 cash.
Yes.
Now, we can then go, and this is how like you hear of people when they buy multiple properties, of buying properties without any cash down. So if you went to buy another $500,000 investment property, the bank would say, hey, John, if you need to buy this property to not pay lender's mortgage insurance, you need to cough up $100,000 as security. Do you want to take it from here?
Yes. Okay. So we didn't sell that first property.
No, we've kept it.
In fact have the value at 500. Our debt's 300. So the banks will lend up to 80% of its value, provided you've got the income to service the debt, right? So the example of a 500K purchase, 80% of 500 is 400K, minus our debt, which is 300, gives us 100 grand of usable equity, right? So the bank can say, we're happy enough, we think bricks and mortar is safe, we'll allow you to take that 100,000 of paper money and you can use that as your deposit on your next 500K property in Glen's example, and you'll pay interest on that 100,000. So it's just not free money. You'll pay interest on that 100,000. If it's an investment property, that 100K will be tax deductible. So, but essentially no money out of your own pocket's been exchanged. You've just used the paper equity from your first property. Okay, so that's a basic definition.
And I think like 20 years ago, like I say it all the time, I bought a book. I forget his name, but he was like 0 to 300 properties in
Steve.
2 years. Steve Knight or McKnight.
Steve McKnight.
The problem was 20 years ago, the banks would give anyone money because it's all good.
Yes.
But there's been a few financial crises and all that. So it's actually harder in this day and age just to leapfrog into properties. Yeah. Because what you're setting up is possibly a house of cards. And if there was a crisis, you'd just be flushed down the toilet.
Yeah. No, and I'm not trying to deflate the hopes of property savvy investors that want to have 10 or 12 properties. But I agree. I think the days of 15 to 20 properties are very much limited. And I think there's still the ability to go and get you 3 or 4 or 5 properties, good quality ones in good sold locations. But you've just got to think more strategically than just, expect that property to go up in value and away we go.
Yeah, so on that, like there was some questions that came through. People were actually asked the exact question, like can everyday people on an everyday income, say a top end everyday income, say we'll just say 80 grand, can someone earning 80 grand a year have 3 or 4 properties? So talk to us with an investment property.
Yeah.
Does the bank, is it easy to get an investment property than a normal house? In terms of, do they look at the rent to pay the mortgage?
They do. So a lot of lenders out there will take that as a positive because we've got income associated with that or projected income from that property. So that's great. That will increase your servicing. Some banks also go through times where they've got an appetite more for investing than they have owner-occupier homes. But it really does depend on someone's situation. And that's why we talk about keeping our debts low, our bad debts low. So no personal loans, no credit cards, those sort of things. And just keep our spending in control. But knowing that you can actually go and get yourself a property that's going to give you positive cash flow, and that's going to set a platform for the second and third property. And I had a clarity call with someone earlier today. We spoke about this in detail. It was like our first property needs to be a winner because if it's highly negatively geared, that first one, then that can set us back from a growth point of view to go and get that second or third property.
Yeah, wow. There's a question here from Carly, and there's not too many spelt like this. I think it might be in Carly who we met in Melbourne, did the clarity call with. Are we predicting a post-pandemic fall in property prices? And if so, how long does John predict the dip will last for?
Carly, 4 years, 6 months and 12 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
You're also a comedian.
No, I haven't got a crystal ball, Carly. But look, I made an assessment a couple of months ago around my thoughts, and I thought we'll see some sort of flattening of the market, some readjusting. I still, to this day, think that that's well under control. The supply and demand is pretty good. The vacancy rates haven't risen. But I do say that the areas that were shaky going into COVID are definitely even shakier now, right? So the vacancy rates are high going in, they're even higher now. The good sold areas that we're researching, they actually haven't shown a dent as yet, right? Now, 2 months' time, that may change, but Carly, I think generally speaking, with most downturns, the quicker we go into the downturn, the quicker we come back out of it. So this one went in at a rate of knots, didn't it?
Yeah,
So,
I'm going to try something here. If you can see that, everyone. So if this was kind of like, if this is time and this is value, and I'm just going to talk about the share market.
yeah.
So the share market was humming along, and then COVID hit. And I was looking at this just the other day, and I know it's not a great diagram, but the share market's kind of back there already.
Yeah.
Like it was a non-event. Like every day on the news at
Yeah.
these points here, as it was dropping, the world was ending.
Yeah.
The market factored it in, and now we moved out. And it's kind of like, I'm really horrendous at art, but let's choose a
you're
nice
going
color
well.
here. Here's a nice purple. But if you look at it, like it's still, you know, it's
Trending
not
in the right direction.
yeah, so I guess what you were saying with the property, and the thing is with the share market, because the value, it's priced daily, it can fall fast.
Yeah.
Where I think maybe the COVID thing, like, remember when it first happened, ScoMo was like, it could be all like, just move in so we can see your face. Oh, it's pretty. We'll get reviewed. The moment Glenn purred at John is when we turned off. I think because when ScoMo said like up here that, oh, we could be gone for 6 months, it was like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
I think now that we're back at work within 2 months in the main and
Yeah.
getting things happening, I don't know if the property market actually had time to reprice itself. So I actually think the property market is probably maybe, I don't know, that I actually slipped then. It was supposed to be
Yeah,
right.
no, you probably slipped in the right direction.
I don't know.
In certain areas, but I think
Let's turn this BS off.
when I'm
Ooh,
looking,
crap.
and I'm not. This isn't a gut feel. It's more of like I do a lot of research around this. I think the majority or the highest age bracket of people who lost jobs through this period is 16 to 20-year-olds, right? So generically speaking, they're not propping the country up, right? So it's your mums and dads, it's your government workers. Now, your three biggest industries: education, construction, and healthcare.
And finance.
Well, the biggest three are those three, and then finance is after that.
Yeah.
But essentially, they're all still in work, right? Now, some construction could suffer, but our mate Joshy Frydenberg's apparently going to release something this week, which I'll talk about in a moment, which may again stem that. And I think the big difference in all of this is the government have actually stood up and been very generous in what they've offered, which has prevented a slippery blood on the streets outcome.
Now, I wasn't going to put this up, but I've done it anyway. I said, John, don't do it because we don't want to bombard people, but it just could be back to, I think, the question about the second property with Sarah. You
Yes.
need to understand your strategy, your hotspots, your not spots, your equity. And this is all about John tonight, but this, if you wanted...
No, it's not.
Oh, hang on. We can't bump the mouse there. Sorry. Oh, it's wild. So if you want to have a look at John's online course, you can jump in there. We've got a discount and it's going to be up for 24 hours. The bloody world's ending here. So check that out. Now, there's one question, John, from Joanna, and this could lead into what you were talking about before. Is stamp duty going to be abolished?
Yes, there's a lot of talk about that, isn't it? There's two...
Well, can I say one thing?
Sure.
In case you don't. No, because I think it's just important to note that stamp duty is state-based.
Yes.
That's all I want to say. So it's not a federal government thing.
Yeah, no. So I was going to lead in with that.
I'll piss off.
No, so I put a question up in our Solve Air Connect Facebook page today. What would you rather, stamp duty or land tax? Because that's the debate at the moment, isn't it? Is to potentially pull stamp duty from the system and replace it with land tax on all properties. Okay, so which includes potentially your principal place of residence. Ouch. So my thinking is, I did some numbers. I want stamp duty to actually stay, because whilst it's a bit of an obstacle coming in terms of the extra amount that we have to get in for a deposit, I think long term it's a one-off, right? It's like lender's mortgage insurance, cost of doing business, that sort of stuff. Going forward, we know that that's all we've paid, whereas land tax, it's paid annually as our land value increases. So you're right, the stamp duty amount is different in every state. But when we're talking land tax, especially for the large landholders, and acreage, back to that earlier question, is a real concern, is the more land we've got, the value of that will increase over time. Our land tax bill is paid annually, and it's only going to increase as that goes. So, like anything, if the government's going to win from it, they'll probably do it.
Yeah, my view is F an ongoing tax.
Yeah, no, it's very risky, the ongoing stuff.
Sting me once, and get out of my life.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the question, is it going to be abolished? Who knows what's happening in Canberra, but look, I think and getting back to the Josh Frydenberg talk this week, apparently he's coming out at some stage this week to release some sort of first homeowner, or just generally get yourself into the market incentive that's more than what we're already getting, and they're talking 50,000.
Well, I thought he was, in the stuff that I read, it was going to be a first homeowners grant, and this is all rumours, right? No one knows. I'll restate, a grant for anyone, whether you're a first homeowner or not, and buy a brand new property.
Yes.
To stimulate the construction industry.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a double-edged, to get someone in the market again, but to keep construction going.
But is that different than the 50
homers.
grand boost that you were talking about? Because that's a lot of bloody money.
No, that's the same one as I was talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're just saying up to 50 grand
Yeah.
per person, regardless of whether you're a first homeowner or not.
Correct.
Because remember when I bought that property up the road, it was brand new at the time. I'd already owned my home.
Yeah.
And I got a New South Wales grant to stimulate the building industry.
Yeah, yeah. And the same thing could happen. Like if the stars align and you do buy new, you could get that grant plus your stamp duty as your first homeowner plus the state grant as well.
Yeah,
so
wow.
you could be in for an extra nothing.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important. Well, it goes back to that the young lady who was thinking about going overseas. If she lines her ducks up in the next 12 months or so, she could get in and even get a cashback in the form of a grant and go away with it.
Potentially, yeah.
Party.
Pays for London.
Love it. Now, do you want to have a chat? Let's have a chat with Sam. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to invite Sam onto the call. And then after Sam pops up, we will then talk about buying off the plan or rent. What's the word? Like build
construct.
House and land.
Yeah, not off the plan.
Yeah, sorry. House and land package.
Yeah.
So if you're there, Sam, can you just pop? Hey, there you go.
You guys got me?
Hey, how are you?
Not bad. How you boys doing?
Pretty good. Now, thanks for jumping in. You were lurking there in the background.
Yes, going very well. Enjoying the show so far.
Oh, really? Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Now,
Thanks, Sam.
Sam, you are, how old are you? We're going to interview you.
24.
You're 24?
24 years old.
Sweet. What do you do for work?
I'm a project manager doing both of construction management and a bit of property development.
Okay, cool. And what type of income do you have?
I'm in that 80K range, so 2 years out of uni now.
Yeah.
So worked through my cadet years and then 2-year graduate now.
Sweet. Now, you are probably one of the first people in Australia to buy a bricklet.
Yes.
So
And that's pretty accurate.
You're a pioneer, Sam.
You're a pioneer. So, because I'm intrigued, and John and I haven't talked to you before. And I said, I briefly, before I said John's going to probably ask you some questions, but just tell us with the bricklet, did you save the money and put it in? Why did you do it? Just talk about your strategy first.
So I had already owned a property up in Queensland. Did a small investment deal with a mate of mine, and I saved a bit more money on the side and didn't really want to get further into debt. Felt like I was already pushing the boundaries as it was. So I saved another $25,000, and I was able to put it into the property market without having to go into debt, and got my piece of the property.
Wow.
So, Sam, can I ask where is this property located?
The Bricklet one?
Yeah.
Avalon Beach.
Avalon Beach. Okay, cool.
400 meters from the beach, a couple hundred meters from the shops.
Wow.
Pretty snazzy site.
Nice. Yeah, okay. So, total... Sorry, I'm just asking a few questions
No,
here.
go for it.
Total outlay for you to get yourself into Avalon Beach brick?
So that Avalon Beach one was 36. So I saved a bit more on that one. That was one of the more expensive bricklets out there. I picked it more because they had a lot of room for capital growth in that one, as well as quite a nice, rental yield on the other side of it.
Cool.
So the property that you bought, how many bricklets in total were sold?
Oh, I couldn't tell you how many bricklets.
So there might be there could be 100 people, for example.
Well, so my
heaps more,
bricklet was
wouldn't
36, and I know that the total purchase price of the land itself was 3.6.
Oh, wow. So
few more bricks.
Yeah, so
Yeah, there'd be a few more bricklet owners in that one.
So I guess everyone listening, the purpose of this is just to show you a real life example. And what I might do is when we send the thank you email with a copy of the replay video of this, I will send a link to the 2 My Millennial Money episodes where we talked with Darren from Bricklet. But I just wanted to get a real life person on and just talk to them about it, because I've been toying with the idea of doing it myself, but because it's so new, we want to get a live fish in the boat. Now, what was the experience like?
So actually purchasing the bricklet was super easy. Jumped on the website, signed up. They have a verification process to make sure you're a real human. And then you upload some cash and away you go.
Wow.
Super simple. Didn't have to bring any lawyers in to do my conveyancing for me. It was all just online, click and press and purchase.
Wow.
So, Sam, tell me, when you bought the bricklet or invested into it, how far into the development was it, and is it complete now? How was the journey?
So at the moment, when I bought it, it's still just got a dilapidated house on it. It's currently, I think it's pretty close to being DA approved now for 7 high-end seniors living units. And once that DA goes through, they'll push through to get that built out over the next year or two.
Okay, so there's only 7 apartments in the complex, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
And it's all seniors living.
All seniors living.
That's pretty good investment, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was thinking it
they're
might be
cashed up.
something with 80 or 100 apartments in the complex, but yeah, it's very much a boutique.
So it would be
Yes.
it'd be very premium. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very premium site. The location is amazing, and I've seen the plans themselves, and they're very high end. They're looking for those right sizes, I guess they call them now, instead of downsizes. People who are not almost looking to buy new houses, buying a new apartment but almost renting and keeping that lifestyle that they had before in the Northern Beaches.
Yeah, so might be a silly question, but all 7 would be rented out.
Yes.
Yep, and any sort of indication on yields in respect to those 7?
I don't know about yields at this point in time. I was more looking at the gross realization of the final product.
Yeah.
Knowing that there was a strong rental yield, because I'm a part of another company that's partnering with Bricklet. It's called Future Realty. They're a tribe that kind of helps mentor people in setting up their strategies. And they gave me a lot of comfort again regarding the rental yield, knowing that there's seniors out there looking to rent, but because there's not a lot of seniors living out there that are seniors living in duplexes or complexes that are rentable, it's more purchase based. It's kind of hard to gauge that rental yield for that kind of property.
But I mean, it's a brand new thing off the beach.
Off the plan. Off the beach, yeah.
Yeah, like so I guess for those wondering how it works, when Sam does his tax return, when it's completed, there'll be a property schedule section, because if someone does a land titles office search for that address, they'll see all the people, including Sam. So it's direct property.
Yep.
And Bricklet, it's a tech play. It is the platform.
Yep.
Because when you buy a property now, they don't everything's electronic. So they don't have to run checks everywhere and do that stuff. It's all electronic. What's the system called? Pixar or something?
Yeah.
Pixar, or whatever it is.
Yeah, Pixar.
So what was your plan after the Bricklet completes? Are you wanting to flip it straight away and sell on the Bricklet, or are you just going to, and I guess this is the thing, Sam, it's like over the scheme of your life, $30,000 isn't a big amount of money. So theoretically you could sit on that for 30 years and forget about it.
Yeah. And I guess continue to get that capital growth that comes from it. I guess once it's been built, it's going to get it's going to be revalued, and my Bricklet probably not going to be worth $36,000. It could be worth $50,000. I know there's opportunities to even split that Bricklet back in half, and I could sell off $25,000 and take that $25 and $25,000 and go buy another Bricklet somewhere else.
Wow.
Still have that rental yield from that smaller piece that I had before.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of extra strategies. There's a lot of opportunity, and what I can do with it once it's finished.
Wow.
Cool.
That's amazing.
It's interesting the seniors living component, because I just had the situation where my wife's grandma is going into one of those facilities where they actually buy a unit, right? And that costs $500,000. So to be able to go into something like that and rent, I'm not sure what the rent per week would be, but
I mean, from a financial planning view, if there were some wealthy individuals, it could be like, keep your money in your allocated pension tax free and just drip feed amount out and rent for 10 years.
I guess the other good thing about this, the Bricklet side of from the renter's point of view, is you're not going to be kicked out of your apartment. You're not going to one day wake up and have the owner of the property say, I want to move back into my house.
Yeah,
because there's so many owners.
Totally.
The owners can really set up their home and really move into it and know that they're not going to be kicked out in 5 years, 10 years. They can, have that long-term security that's their home.
Yeah, it's great.
So I'm going to just enable the chat. If you do have any questions for Sam, just pop it in the chat now, because we'll just spend 5 more minutes with Sam. And there's some questions coming through.
So, Sam, when you tell people what you've got in your portfolio, do you say you've got an investment on Avalon Beach, or you got a brick?
Oh, I like to say I own a piece of property in Avalon Beach.
Yeah, nice.
My name's on title, so I still own the property.
Beautiful. Yeah, good.
Can still drive past it and point out, yep, I own some of that property there.
Yeah, that's right. Will you know which one's yours?
No, I don't know which brick is mine.
Yeah, so here's a question from Lauren. How do you sell a Bricklet?
Back on the website.
Okay, so Bricklet is the platform.
Yes.
So it's
all the trading happens. It's kind of like the ASX of property, I guess. You jump online, you say you want to sell your Bricklet, you throw it back up there, and people can go buy your Bricklet that you want to sell.
Wow. And Meja asked, do I need to save a deposit to borrow money using the equity from my? Oh no, that's not a Bricklet question.
So Bricklet has recently mentioned that they are doing loans now. So even if you've got $5,000, $10,000 saved up, you can top up your savings account and go buy that Bricklet for $25,000. So you don't have to save that full 25. If you got 5, if you got 10, whatever your savings are, you have that opportunity to borrow that amount. Future Realty is having a webinar as well this coming next week, and they've got me coming on just to look at that further as well, to show that it's possible to buy property now and not have to wait, until you've got that small fortune to go buy property.
Yeah. Frankie asks, Bricklet, is your name on the title, or is the property held in trust for you as a beneficiary? No, that you are on the title. You will own that portion. And for those to get a bit technical, in terms of estate planning, it's tenants in common. So if you died, sorry, Sam, I've just killed you off for a second.
Oh, good.
Your $30,000 Bricklet would go into your estate, and the Bricklet, basically the other people living in the unit don't get your Bricklet. It forms part of your estate.
Yeah.
My name's on title. I have the same rights as any old property owner has, whether you have the whole property or part of the property, you get the rental income, you have, all the same benefits as owning any property that you would, before.
So you don't need to engage a solicitor to settle, basically what you're saying?
No, it's all done through the website. It's
Yep.
all online. I don't have to run around looking for some conveyancer to look after you.
Yeah.
Justin asked, does it affect your first homeowners grant? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, so if you were a first home, you can't live in it. So you
can't live in it, so you can't claim that because you're living it for the first 6 months.
However, if the government do grants for anyone to buy property that's brand new, you could theoretically put 35 grand in a bricklet and you might get 20 grand back from the government. Excellent. If that happens, I am buying a bricklet tomorrow for 30 grand. Imogen asks, would you invest in a second bricklet? And we've got 1 more minute left. Would you invest in a second bricklet, and why? Why not, Sam?
I would. I guess the ability to diversify now. I can buy bricklets all over the country and take advantage of that market growth in different states, different opportunities. I can buy commercial property. I can buy residential property. I can buy units. I can buy houses. I'm totally diversified across the market now without having just to put all my eggs in one basket and hope that I hit the jackpot in one suburb. I'm now spread out throughout all the different markets.
There were excuse me, there's a lot of these questions that are coming through that are answered on the podcast episodes that we did, but because a lot of it, John was skeptical and probably still is ish. But we resolved when we had the chat that it all had to do with strategy.
Yeah.
So if your strategy was to buy property and in an area like Avalon, sure, it could work.
Yeah. Well, you've got exposure in a blue chip market, haven't you?
Totally. And there's a question here from Joanne. What happens if bricklet no longer exists if you want to sell in 20 years? We cover that on the podcast episode. Alicia asked, if you sell it, does the amount increase? Sam.
It's the same as capital growth. If you're in the market, you own property in the market. So if it's like any property, if you put it on the market, someone's willing to pay X amount of money for it. It's the same as bricklet. Your value goes with the market. It's not. It's whatever someone's willing to pay for that bricklet.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we might leave it there because we've got other stuff to get to. But Sam, thanks so much for just sharing a bit of your experience.
Yeah,
you seem pretty chill about it.
Yeah, I grew up in property. My dad's a property developer. I've been surrounded by property. I've got a degree in construction management. I guess it's just the...
So for you, it was no risk. Yeah.
I wanted to be an early adopter. I wanted to be someone who took advantage of it, when it's still new to, achieve my property goals, achieve my wealth that I want to in life. And I feel like this is perfect part of my strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's diversification for him, isn't it? He's already got real property that he can drive past, and he's just diversified into something with a smaller outlay.
And maybe what we'll do is when I send the email out, I'll put a thing in the survey box, and if you want to attend a webinar just on bricklet, we might chat with Darren and see if we can organise that. And we'll spend an hour on bricklet. We'll get Darren up here into the studio. So there we have it. Now, the questions, how does bricklet make money? Is it the same as BrickX? All that stuff is in the podcast episode. Totally available. And there was a question here, are you single? And some guy's like, I'm straight, but I would turn.
Can you leave your details, mate? We could double up tonight. The dating site.
All the dating apps.
Yeah. All right. So, Sam, thank you so much. We might get you to pop your stuff off. And
thanks, Sam.
Thanks so much for that, Sam. So there you go. That's just a bit of behind the scenes of our show episode, whatever we're doing, webinar partner Bricklet.
Yeah, thanks, Bricklet.
Now, there was a lot of stuff that came in about buying house and land packages. Like, there were so many questions. Now, John, we're going to just share, and I want to do 5 minutes only on this.
Yep.
And then we want to get back into questions. But John is working on a thing, and do you want me to get the slide up? I'll get the slide up.
Yeah, so while you're doing that,
Yep.
It's actually coincidence that we're running a webinar tonight. It wasn't planned around this by any means, but we've been working in the background at Solvair for a couple of months now on building a specialised house and land team, because what we've found out there is so many people come to us with some uncertainties around where do I buy, how many investors are in there, is it too large an estate, how do I trust a builder, which builder is a good one, which one's not, what price should I pay, is it fixed price, is it not, how does it suit my strategy, etc., etc. So we've been basically planning and doing our due diligence around how this works, and personally I've been I'm a fan of having all strategies available to us and not just focusing in on one every time I go and invest, and I say the same for all of our investors, but over the time I've done a few of these personally and helped a lot of clients do them as well, in and amongst other things within their portfolio. But so just quickly, do you want me to keep going with it?
Yeah, I can go to the next one.
Yeah, so
Just trying to work out this.
Yeah, so why would we do it? Obviously, there's a lot of interest in it because of the first home owner stimulus packages from the government and state government, and I'll get to that in a moment. But obviously, we want to know our strategy. So capital growth for client, we're adding value to the land to increase equity. So tax benefits for the investor. And this, we wanted to focus also on the owner-occupier that wanted to build their home, whether that be their dream home or just simply to take advantage of the concessions that are available from the government and for the stars to align. And then the big one, low maintenance. Investors like that because we know that for the next 10 years it's pretty much maintenance free. They don't need to fix hot water systems and things like that, and it's appealing for tenants to be able to do that, live in that. And
I will say the reason why I thought this was probably a little bit tacky to put in, but there would have been probably 30% of people questions to do with house and land packages, and with 60% of people being first home buyers, I think there is that much opportunity for the right property in the right location, to really maximise on the grants and whatnot that are available.
Yeah.
So what do you look for?
Yeah. Obviously, capital growth potential locations is a major driver. If it's owner occupier, then obviously it's where that particular person is living, but the build design is a critical part with this, because knowing that we don't want a really cheap tacky investor stock, but we don't want high end where we pay too much for that build and it becomes a really low yield investment. So it's that sweet spot. We talk about infill or greenfield estates. Infill basically in the middle of an existing suburb. Greenfield is opening up to a new suburb. So we probably tend more towards infill than we do greenfield, but there are different greenfield opportunities around the country. But all in all, we want to be surrounded by high owner-occupied dwellings. So we want to be almost the worst house in the best street when we're building. We don't want to be that best house McMansion amongst all the crappy, cheap investor homes.
Mm. So why use your team?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I've had 20 years of experience in it. I'm starting from the bottom up for some reason, but developing my own portfolio through that as one of my strategies, whether it be build single dwelling or duplex, etc. Team of people to assist the whole process from start to finish. People don't often go through this process because it's too stressful, so we take that obviously out of their hands. Understanding the build costings and inclusions. So because I've been doing it so long, we know what we should be paying for something per square metre to build, etc. Build specs, as I mentioned, access to be able to develop, have access to developers, and builders around the country. So not just focusing in on one area because that's where I live personally. So it's looking at the major markets around the country. As I always say, top 30 cities by location, and we focus in on those, and ease of process for the client.
So basically, you're looking for good stuff. So, long story short, if I wanted to buy a house and land package, I would say, John, can you find the right house and land package for me?
Yeah, so just flick through the next one. Keep going again. Yeah, so there's the 4 options basically that clients can take. They find their own block of land and we find the best build package for you, owner, occupier, investment. They want to find the block and best build, they want us to find the block and the build and actually live in it as their owner occ. And then the other option is they want us to find the whole package to suit their investment needs. And the last one is I want to go and play a bigger game, and that might be a mini development type structure, duplex, triplex, etc.
So basically, I think, is it true that there's no cost to the person who uses you? So how do you make money?
Yeah, so we generally have a upfront small commitment fee which allows us to get started on that for the person. They outline their borrowings and everything with us, and then we go to work. So like any of those, it's very similar to a mortgage broker in the sense that they pay us a referral fee for introducing them to the client, right? Yep. So full transparency there. The key is that the best interest is in finding the best package for the client, not just saying, well, let's go into this land estate because it's easy, or this builder because I know them. So
if you go into a house and land office, okay, and you talk to the nice person who's the salesperson there, if you buy from them, they will get a bonus for signing you up, okay? Yeah. So how it works is, in the background, they've got people like John who, if they introduce people to the builder, they don't need to pay a salesperson, so they pay the fee to John. So that's all it is. There's no different cost. So
yeah, and how that came about for me was I was always wary of, on realestate.com, house and land from X amount, right? But knowing that the X amount didn't include landscaping, letterboxes, fences, half the house, right? And also, clients didn't know what they should be paying for something. If they got lending on it, that was the main thing, right? So knowing that, I've researched in the last 3 weeks 12 different builders, right? And there's been a discrepancy of around $60,000 for the same product.
Wow.
Right. So that's where...
So you're not locked into one specific builder?
Totally not.
No. Okay.
No.
So let's just, lastly, so you're saying people could get into a property for around 33 grand? Yeah.
So I don't want to steal Bricklet's thunder here, but in this example, and it's a bit of a stars align type scenario, but I've just given the example of a $500K rent ready package. So that's house and land, nothing more to pay. It's ready to be tenanted. Deposit needed 10%, 90% LVR is 50 grand, plus our stamps rounded out at 60K, because you only pay stamp duty on the land. Now, in regional Victoria, which I'm quite bullish about at the moment, there's no stamp duty with the first homeowner as long as you live in it for 12 months, plus you get a 20K rebate. Now, it's only 10K if you do it in Melbourne, but the problem is finding a 500K package in Melbourne is very hard. So the real numbers are basically your 60K minus your 20K rebate. Total funds required is 33K. So you got 60K minus your 7 of stamp minus your 20K of rebate gives you $33,000. So will you need that money going in? Absolutely, but then you get it back in the form of a rebate.
So we might leave it there on the presentation if it's all right.
Yeah, sure.
But what I might do is put up if you want more information on what John's doing around the house and land package stuff, click that link, fill out your details, and John will get you some information. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, so it's just a no obligation, quick chat to assess. You might be just half interested, fully interested, just want to find out a little bit more detail. We can have a quick chat.
Maria asks, would like to know a little more about buying an investment property versus buying a home. and buying regionally versus metropolitan. So let's talk regional versus metropolitan.
Yeah, good question, Maria. Big difference, unfortunately, is price. So I can metro versus regional. I'm probably 200 or 300K different, to be honest. So it comes down to would ideally would everyone rather buy in Sydney or Melbourne historically due to performance? Absolutely. Would, if you had your 800 or 900 and you could manage the holding costs and the yields were good, then happy days. But unfortunately, it makes it a lot harder to do that when you need over 100K of deposit. So, yeah, that's where I think, Maria, if you can afford metro and you know your running costs, I'd still like to see some land there versus a unit or apartment. So if I couldn't get myself a house, I might look regional.
Yeah. Jeremy asks, my wife and I turned 40 this year. Have we missed the opportunity to build a property portfolio large enough to retire in 15 years?
Yeah, good question, Jeremy. So 40, you're really only halfway done, aren't you? Average life expectancy 85.
You've basically got 20 years of actual working.
So, but you've only been working for 20 years of that.
Yes.
Of your life. So I think there's a good amount of time, Jeremy, to make some inroads into that. You've just got to keep an eye on the long game and not try and aggressively make large returns in a 2 or 3 year period. Just buy with strategy and let it do its thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing. Like you've just got less time to recover, so it's almost like less risks, which means more due diligence to really narrow that risk.
True,
so,
absolutely.
Brooke asks, how do you overcome the mental side of wanting to make the first move but have disapproving parents?
Very good question as well, isn't it? I think everyone goes through a little bit of this throughout their life. There'll be friends and family that have really got our best needs at heart, but not necessarily the best for our financial situation, if that makes sense. So I think you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, Brooke. I mean, if we're 13 or 14, we're mum and dad are our parents and they need to lead the way. But when we're an adult, I think we've got to brush that aside, as hard as it may be, and forge our own destiny in that respect.
Yeah, what I would say to Brooke is it's that disapproving of parents. Like, I think it's understanding why they're disapproving. Is it because, you've got after-pay overdue all the time, or you've got credit cards that can't get paid and they see that you are not handling your money well? That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Is it because that they bought a property once and they went under because they bought the wrong property? So there could be their mindset, or they looking at you and saying, looking out, we don't think it's wise. So what I would probably do, Brooke, is make sure your own personal finances are really cleaned up. So you're debt-free, you're saving cash, you're working full-time, and you're really out there doing the best that you can.
Yeah.
Then what you might do is you might do John's property course, online course, and really learn for yourself. Then talk to a mortgage broker just to get some information. But what I would probably do is invite your parents along to the mortgage broker just to get information. We're not going there to sign up to anything. We're just giving the parents the option, hey, can you come along and go down this journey with me and understand the facts? Because we need to put the facts on the table. And then the third thing might be, again, it might be a clarity call with John and tell the parents or your parents, hey, do you want to jump in on the clarity call, or get John to record the clarity call and then play it back to your parents, just to bring them in and really understand why they're disapproving.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon one at all. It's actually very common. And I think the big one, you're right, is understanding where they may be coming from. But just realise, Brooke, that if you're listening, that they do have your best interests at heart, although it might not sound like it. They do, and that's probably why they're saying it.
Jared asks, Good evening, Glennie and Johnny. My wife and I are looking at buying our first home to live in. We own an investment property, so they've maybe been rent vesting. Once we buy our home, is it a good idea to switch the investment property loans to interest only and use the surplus rental income to pay off our non-deductible debt on the home as an effective strategy? Or should we keep the investment properties doing their thing? Also, thoughts on holding off purchasing anything in Adelaide for 12 months until the dust settles from COVID. P.S. I've been in touch with Sean Welly, and he's a legend and great to work with. So Sean Wellman is our mortgage broker in Melbourne that we refer people to. So a couple of things. Let's talk mortgage options.
Yes.
And why we might change payment types.
Yeah, so I think, Jared, that's a no-brainer. I would be getting that to interest only and cracking down on my owner-occupied debt, because in mortgage land, that is non-tax deductible debt, the owner-occupied debt. So we want to get rid of that, and banks consider it actually bad debt. So we want to get rid of that debt as quick as we possibly can. The interest on our investment property generally is good debt. We can claim back through our tax deductions, etc., as provided that we're still earning money. So that's what I'll be focusing on, number one.
And Adelaide at this time?
Yeah, so Adelaide's not the worst market going around. Waiting 12 months, I think I did say it at the start of COVID as well. If we had a strategy to buy, I would be seeing that strategy through. I wouldn't be holding off. Supply and demand generally is in check in most good quality locations. So I don't think we're finding massive discounts at the moment. And if we are finding them, they may not be the best locations to be buying in, unless it's off market or something unusual. But yeah, so if we're looking at buying in Adelaide, Jared, and we're wanting to diversify our portfolio, then I would seriously look at in the next few months.
The question is, the chat's on. Dana asks, John, if I purchase a clarity call using the discount code tonight, can I delay that call and have it in a few months? I reckon if you purchase that tonight, you've got to be booked in by the end of June.
Is that's your answer?
I don't know.
No,
it's up to you. But
no, look, it doesn't worry me.
Okay.
You can
there you go.
You can purchase it and book it in at some stage. Just remember that you've actually booked it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So
no, because I seriously, like, people's situation changes,
Sure.
and they know that in 2 months' time they might be in a better space to chat.
Yeah. So there you go.
I'm not as harsh as this bloke.
I'm just like, nah, you want it, you pay for it. Now the chat's open, so there's questions that you can put. Harry asks, what kind of mechanism would you recommend to save? Oh, we're not going to do these anymore. We're pretty much done with them.
All right,
and we're just going to go live on the
chat.
Almost hit the camera. Nice. We're just going to go live. How do we save for a house? A managed fund, ETF, term deposit. Number one, we're not investing any money into the share market unless we can leave it there for at least 5 years.
Yep.
So if it is a longer term play to save and build money, it might be using an ETF, for example, in your own name. However, you need to look up on Google the First Home Super Saver Scheme, which allows you to save up to $30,000 in your super account, and you get some tax concessions, and there's a podcast episode about it, or you can ask the Facebook group. And if the super fund goes down, when you pull the money out, your deposit will not be impacted. So really good scheme there. There's a question here. Let's have a look. Tim asks, hey guys, I'm currently paying off a mortgage. I usually have a little more left over each paycheck after expenses and the loan. Would you recommend this money to pay down the loan or invest in micro investments, etc.? My loan is fully variable, so there's no limit on a deposit and has a redraw facility. So he's got money left over at the end of the month. Does he just keep pumping the mortgage, or do we go, let's diversify our income, or let's...
Yeah, well, it depends on his mindset around it. Some just want to crack down and get rid of that debt, don't they? The first thing, some redraws aren't offset facilities, so make sure you are offsetting that debt. But yeah, I'd probably, look, I'm the wrong person to talk to about micro investing.
Yeah, I would probably say, for me, from a financial planning point of view, and we've got 5 minutes left, so get your questions in. I would say you've got money left over. How to invest that for the long term in the most tax effective way. Now, if you do not want to buy more property, I think super's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Because you can put that money in and you get charged 15% tax and it's growing in a tax-free environment. So I would personally look at that. I can't speak for what anyone else would do.
Salary sacrifice.
But I would salary sacrifice. That's just me.
Yeah.
But Tim, speak to a financial advisor. I can refer you to somebody, sortyourmoneyout.com/get help or click the get help because I think you're at that time in your life where you could have a look at some strategy in terms of because the tax saving with the salary sacrifice, it might actually be better off and give you money, invest for the future, save tax and pay the mortgage down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, worst case, the money sits in his offset or redraw. It's saving him 3%.
Totally. Absolutely. Alyssa asks, do I wait for the property that has everything I want or settle for something that has less but gets into the market now? First home buyers wanting to get out of my parents' place.
Yeah, don't rush to get out of your parents' place, by the way, because you can save a truckload of money while you're there.
And I would say the perfect property doesn't exist. I would write down a list of things and circle 80% of them.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's what I would probably say to that. All right, we're doing rapid fire. Grace asks, hi guys, where do I find free research on market/suburbs? It'd have to be like domain or real estate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of information if you dig deep enough in there. Our SQM research talks vacancy rates and yields. So, yeah, population ID is a good one for looking at population trends.
I'm putting a poll up as well, if you can answer that. And there's 2 questions here about granny flats.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us, Johnny boy.
Granny flats, yeah. So high yield increases your cash flow, mildly increases the value of the property, makes it more appealing for an investor to buy it from you one day. But the big play, the big strategy for putting a granny flat in is the increased yield and cash flow. So I think it's a great strategy when you're nearing retirement with the low debt, dual income on the one block. You've got some great cash flow for retirement.
But also, if you're in a good income in a good suburb and, you've got to buy a home to live in anyway, get a block that's decent enough just in the future. Because if you want to move out of there and buy a bigger home, you might go, all right, let's throw $100,000 into a granny flat, get 11% yield.
Yeah, you've got a few variables up your sleeve.
Yeah, so I just the whole granny flat / studio idea, I think it's a yes for me, again, if the planets align. Now, 2 minutes left. And Joe said about the granny flat, should I use my redraw money? I think you just need to talk to your mortgage broker, talk to your tax accountant and actually do the numbers.
Yeah.
Part of your coaching crap that you do, whatever, I'm trying to be fast. Do you do some basic cash flow modeling for people?
Yeah, we do. We understand, well, if we have to put 30 grand into a granny flat to lend on it, where else could we put that 30 grand and what that might look like as another investment property, for example. So, yeah, understanding the long-term game to then make that next decision.
Yeah, totally. I'm just reading. Okay, we've got 1 minute to go.
Gone quick.
The last question is, and if you want to rewatch this or send it to a friend or whatever, you can watch it on YouTube tomorrow. We'll send it. And please, if you can fill out the feedback form, would love to know. It's anonymous. It's only 8 questions. Erin asks, and for the last question of the night, and it's been so fun hanging out with all of you.
It has.
I've had a good time.
Loved it.
And Erin asks, what are some big turn-offs for potential investment properties? I'm getting caught up on finding a property that would appeal to the largest range of potential renters.
Yeah, I would go further than that and look at who am I selling it to in 10 or 15 years' time. So, yeah, who can I rent it to is important, but who's going to buy it from me is probably a bigger outcome for growth purposes.
Yeah, I think, well, she talks about the largest range of renters, not necessarily capital growth. I'm looking at infrastructure, so hotels, hospitals, schools, public transport. Is it on the outskirts within an hour and a half of a capital city?
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at. And if, I'm not looking at Broken Hill if you're watching from Broken Hill, I'm sure it's lovely. But I'm straight up looking at the infrastructure stuff.
Yeah, which you're doing to buy anyway, aren't you?
Yeah, hospital, universities. Like, okay, we could flip it. Would you live in the rental property that you're about to buy?
See, I would say no. I wouldn't have lived in a lot of mine.
Yeah, true. I wouldn't live wherever my other one is.
Yeah.
But a lot of people would.
And that's where you can't get emotionally involved in that.
Well, guys, it looks like I just put a poll up. Would you do another property webinar? 94% of you said yes.
Wow. So we're back.
We're back.
Tomorrow night?
But hey, seriously, we have had so much fun. And again, I just want to really encourage you to fill out the feedback form. There's a section in that form that will send it through that will have free text. So you can free text like, Glenn cut John off. John didn't talk enough. Like all the stuff. Abuse us. Like I've seen it all. Doesn't bother me.
Go to town.
But it will just allow us to really hone in on doing this.
For sure.
I'm going to ask if the time was good. How many people watched this webinar tomorrow? There was 1,600 people. So
not bad.
A good sized group. So I'm just having a look in the chat to see if there's any... okay, everyone's saying thanks, good info. Thanks a million, legends. Oh, there's no trolls. Oh, they've already gone. See, I feed the trolls.
You love them. I'll have a new
Should
drink
we?
bottle
Okay,
next.
put in the chat. The webinar is officially over. Officially over. Should we do a webinar after party?
Yeah.
Who wants a webinar after party?
Why not?